This is probably the smallest full-frame cinema camera in the world, the sigmafp. Hello, my name is Ole. Welcome to the third episode of my sigmafp masterclass. In the last episode we have established when selecting 12-bit RAW, the sigmafp operates in CineEI. It is crucial to understand that this means the exposure is determined by a combination of aperture and shutter speed. Altering ISO in this case is only changing the distribution of the overall available dynamic range stops between highlights and shadows. To measure exposure, the sigmafp has got various built-in tools. Especially helpful are the false colors, which easily visualize where middle gray and the sensor clipping point are located, and L-zone. This tool is capable of showing the different exposure levels in your scene measured in stops represented by different colors. Since the sigmafp does not have a built-in log profile, the internal display is only capable of showing up to 3 stops of your dynamic range over middle gray. The Atomos Ninja is capable of real-time converting the raw input from the camera into vlog. By adding a proper Rec. 709 monitoring LUT, this enables you to see an exact preview for any selected ISO. Let's talk about exposure strategies. One option is to expose to the right, which means you're exposing just so that the critical highlights in your image won't clip. This technically gives you the strongest signal-to-noise ratio. However, since it's very likely that in between different shots you have to adjust your exposure, this workflow cannot be considered that consistent. Another approach would be to expose for your talent skin. This will end up with way more consistent results. However, since the signal-to-noise ratio isn't as strong as when you're exposing to the right, it is likely that you are introducing a little bit more noise to your image. To understand how powerful the combination of CineEI and these two exposure strategies can be, let's have a look on 2 examples. The first shot is an example for exposing to the right. When I was on set, I figured I would need as much stops over middle gray as I could get to produce a smooth highlight roll-off, and additionally I needed to see how much shadow detail I could get. Therefore, I selected ISO 800 to preview the image. I adjusted my exposure with aperture and ND filters just so that the clouds next to the sun weren't clipping. As you can see, this led into an image with a very smooth highlight roll-off and a lot of details in the shadows. However, if you look closely to the bushes in front, you will see that you have a little bit of noise. How would this image have looked like previewed in ISO 100? Let's take a look. I didn't touch my aperture or ND filters and just selected ISO 100 to preview the image. As you can see, since we have much less information available over middle gray, we couldn't produce a very smooth roll-off. The transition from the clouds into the sun is pretty harsh. However, since we have now allocated much more stops of the overall dynamic range into the shadows appear way cleaner. This shot is an example for exposing to the talent skin. We have selected ISO 100 in this case and adjusted the aperture and ND filters just so that the skin tone brightness is in a normal area. However, since we now have only 3 stops of dynamic range over middle gray, you can see that all the sky details are gone. The sky is totally blown out. In the next shot, we have selected ISO 800 instead and compensated the exposure by adding in more ND to get the skin brightness back to the normal level. As you immediately notice, all of the sky details are now back in the range. This is because ISO 800 has got 6 stops of dynamic range over middle gray, which in this case was enough to capture all of the sky details. The 2 examples before were shot in natural light only. If you would be able to bring additional light, this of course has an impact on your strategy. You would be now completely free to choose your ISO value based on the characteristics, like how much highlight roll-off you would need and the texture. Thank you for watching. I'm looking forward to see you back on the next episode to discuss Rec 709, loots, highlight and shadow roll-off, and the impact of adding contrast to your image.